The True You podcast is all about tapping into the resources of the true you.
Problem with trying to be someone else who you think you need to be to get by and get more is that you have to try harder than you need to in life.
And that's exhausting because you've lost access to resources like creativity, clarity, compassion, and confidence.
We recognize it seems odd to discover that you aren't being the true you, but there's an empowering homecoming that you can feel when you rest back into your authentic self, the true you. Hey everyone, welcome again to the True You podcast, where we look at this journey of being human and focusing on who we really are so that we can be at our best, our most comfortable, face our challenges, and be fulfilled. So I'm always joined by my dear partner in this crime, Bill Tierney, right, who's an IFS practitioner and a results-oriented coach. I myself am a leadership coach with a new book out called Leadership as Relation, and we're joined today by Violet Eden. So,
welcome.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
It's good to have you.
Well, let me just talk a minute. Let me just say something about how I met Violet and came to introduce her, and then I'd love to have you read her bio, and let's get into it. How's that sound?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just before we hit record, I was trying to remember, how did this happen? A week or two ago, Violet and I had a conversation on Zoom, and I was absolutely enthralled. We'd already agreed that she would be on the podcast, and I was even more excited once we had a conversation. And I'm eager to get into some of the things that we have already talked about, and maybe some things that we haven't yet. So Parts Work Practice is a free practice group for folks that want to practice the IFS model. And my partner, Allison Dyer, who was a guest earlier on the True You podcast, and I have been running that group now for about 4.5 years. And part of that group is a private Facebook group called Parts Work Practice, which Violet is a participant in. And she posted a comment or a question in one of the IFS groups, and I responded to it, and that's how we connected.
Mm-hmm.
And then I messaged her on Messenger and asked would she be interested in being on the podcast. And so here she is.
Yes.
And before we really get to hear your voice, let us sort of contextualize this for folks. Violet is a psychotherapist, and she lives and works in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And she specializes in self-love, authenticity, and becoming spiritually awake. So right up our alley. She's currently writing a book on these topics, and it's entitled A Special Kindness, the Practice of Self-Love and Authenticity. So we've got lots we want to dig into there. Thank you for being with us.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Could I start out by, I also read more about you in preparation, and you had written about some very extraordinary experiences that you've been through personally, and I'm assuming that they've played a role in your understanding of this thing called the true you. And it reminded me, as I was reading about your getting rid of cancer, and you're also having lost your memory, that of an exercise I was taught a long time ago when I first learned meditation. It was sort of an introductory exercises where, with the eyes closed, the teacher had us feel our body, like just really get into the body, be absorbed in attention on the body, and then notice what it is that's paying attention to the body. And then he led us in observing our own mind, the thoughts and the feelings and the memories and the anticipations in the mind, and then asked us again, what is it that's observing your thoughts? And so I feel like we were you got to do this in your life. Like first you had this experience of a whole new body, or attention on your body and a new relationship to your body, then attention on your mind and a whole new you and relationship to, and that's just seems to put one in a very spiritual place, if you ask me. So I wondered what.
Yes. I like the exercise you mentioned. I went through I was in a Rupert Spira group and looking at videos of his teachings, and he has one very similar to what you're talking about. It adds an element, though, that I think is really important and interesting. And it's kind of so it goes like this. Notice that if you're not thinking, are you still there? What we're looking for in this exercise is what's the I? What is the I that's looking around, that's here, that's paying attention to this or that? So that's the I exercise. And so if you aren't thinking, are you still there? Yeah. Okay. How do you know? I'm just aware that I am. You're aware that you're there. And if you withdraw your attention from your perceptions and sensations and your thoughts, are you still there? Yeah. Well, how do you know? I don't know. I'm just here. I'm aware that I'm here. So that it brings it down to the I, the very core of oneself, is awareness itself. That's a word we have for it as human beings. You know, it can't encapsulate it, but I think it's a nice word because it's people understand what being aware is. And then he said, and then notice some qualities about awareness. Turn your awareness on awareness itself. And, what do you notice about it? Does it come and go? No, it's always there. Does it fluctuate? Do you notice? No, there's no fluctuation whatsoever in it. So I would call that the core I would call that, the core essence of everything, or the one consciousness. So the way I look at a human being is in the very center is that. So when I say I this, I that, whether I realize it or not, I'm coming from a point of consciousness and referring to things. And then the way I look at it, and then it's in the center of a sphere of consciousness. And the sphere of consciousness is our soul. And it's not just one thing, it's individuated. There's something unique in about every soul. So I see that soul is emanating through the body and the mind, thus creating the experience of authentic self, or the real self, or our uniqueness. So for me, I think it's very helpful to first of all understand the point of awareness within ourselves. It's nice to withdraw into it. It's very peaceful. But to also recognize that we have what we might call uniqueness, and it's not just the body. And in biology, there's something else there. And I like the question, do you prefer chocolate or vanilla? And people can answer that and say, oh, vanilla. Well, why? I don't know. I just do. There's something unique about our preferences, our gifts, our interests, our style, our so I think that's the authentic self, and it's important. We don't, in my mind, we don't want to dissolve into nothingness, become nothing. That we're here as a something, as an individuation of this, and it's precious. If I'm here as an individuation, both spiritually and physically, I see my main job is to be that, and to be that as with as much integrity and care, to be my authentic self is doing my job, if that's what I'm here as. So emphasize that.
That's very great. That is great summary. I think of the history of philosophy about human being. It's really well said. And I just wanted to, if I could, and if you're up for it, ask how these experiences in your life, led you to your understanding of your authenticity.
Yes. So I read a book around maybe 25, 30 years ago by Karen Horney called Neurosis and Human Growth. And in that book, she talks about that there's a false self and a real self. That's the first time I'd ever heard of such a thing. And that the false self is more or less our programming, the thoughts that are our belief systems, which are downloaded by our childhood experiences. They aren't us. They're like downloading programs in a computer. And if we can live inside of that, and it's more living out the false self, but there's something deeper, there's something authentic that she refers to as real self.
Mhm.
And so I became interested, and then the next major piece was reading John Bradshaw's Inner Child books, uh, 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 reclaiming your inner child, and doing inner child exercises, and realizing that by accessing my inner child, I was creating a circuit down to my authentic responses. The inner child is not trying to be something. It seems like it's just being what it is. It doesn't know how to be other. It's just sort of giving its real feelings and
It
fears.
was there before all those downloads.
Right. That was there from the beginning, and so it's an access to the core uniqueness in our soul, so to speak. So
Mhm.
after we're gone, we pop out of our body, we're still going to be that. When people near-death experiencers pop out of their body, some of them will say, "Well, I looked down on my body, I realized I must have died, and then I realized, but I'm still here. I am still here." That same point of consciousness within an individuation. They don't pop out and say, "I popped out and I was one with everything." They pop out and say, "I'm still here." So again, that individuation of ourselves, I just think is a precious thing.
That's very helpful. Yeah. Well, it also gives be, it's an extraordinary experience for one thing, and the way that you talk about it, I like, because it gives us all access to play with that and to discover that authentic self inside of us. So it's very
Yeah,
helpful. Thank you for
I'm
the
glad. So
vocabulary.
yeah, so here I had sort of that idea and that thought and some practices going around that. Um, and I did that. I became a psychotherapist, and I used inner child work a lot. Saw it a very robust, very helpful process. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was scheduled for a mastectomy. And at the time, I'd been meditating regularly for a while. I had some, you get side effects of psychic abilities, seeing auras, or you picking up energy. And they're byproducts of a regular meditation process. At any rate, a friend came to me before the mastectomy and said, "You're a spiritual person. Don't you want to at least try some other thing, or see if there's another way?" And I said, "Well, it makes sense to me. If you've got cancer in your body, you get it out." But it got me thinking, is there another way? I mean, is it worth, exploring? So I went to a medical intuitive, she called herself.
Mhm.
And I just called and said I'd like to make an appointment and come in. I didn't tell her what I had or anything. When I got there, I said, "Well, I have breast cancer." And she says, "I know. I've been praying about it all week." And she says, "And I would love to tell everyone what I'm about to tell you, but I can't. But in your case, I'm only hearing one thing: complete and total healing." And she says, I don't know how it's going to come about. You might need a little surgery or something. She's not sure, but you'll be completely happy with the results. That's what I know.
Hmm.
So here's where the authenticity comes in, right? Because I had a dilemma on my hands now, didn't I? All the doctors get a mastectomy now. And then this woman saying that actually there's an intention. She considers herself a medical intuitive, but she channels spirits of some kind. They guide her, so she's able to give you that information. So it's like listening to a channel, and this is what the being said. And I searched my heart about it and decided I think that the right way to go is to at least try it. And so put the mastectomy off for 3 months, and began seeing her where she'd guide me and run love through my body. And so it's a story that has a lot of details, but I'm going to keep it succinct within the context of our conversation. But at any rate, I went in for the 3-month checkup, and the cancer had reduced 50%. We weren't fighting the cancer. Every day I had to hold my breast and send love to it, and have 4 people I know send love. So it was a love-based healing. So, I mean, once there was the 50% reduction, I was on board now, and we were full steam ahead. And at the end of a year, I had my final scan, and they thought their machine was broken because the cancer was completely gone, and the tissue that had been eaten up by the cancer had grown back. So you can't tell I'd ever had breast cancer. And so one of the interesting things was, so I went to her one last time after I had the final results to just and to have her ask the spirits, why me? And the spirit said, well, for many reasons, which will be revealed over time.
Hmm.
But if you want to know what it is about you in particular that made this possible, it's because you trust yourself.
Hmm.
And this is what is unique about you.
Hmm.
Okay. And then they said, and if you think that was a miracle, it's nothing compared to the second miracle. Okay. But we'll stick with the first miracle.
Can I just interrupt 1 second to underline what I'm hearing, and then I'll let you continue because it's fascinating. But just to like create a caesura for the listener, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that this relationship to the true you has the power to heal us.
So I think about it this way, that rather than listening to all the doctors and research and people, to everyone saying, you have a mastectomy. Oh my God, the doctors were freaking out. I won't see you again until after the mastectomy. But rather than listening to that, I listened to the guidance of my authentic self. I'd had enough practice hearing from it, so to speak, and saying, okay, it's saying go this way. So I followed that leading through the entire process. That was my way of dealing with it. And apparently the fact that I, was so connected to and believed in it and chose to follow that over what anybody else said, is what made the healing possible.
Got it. Amazing. I mean, I just feel like there's a sun in my heart burning bright right now listening to you.
Wow, I love that.
So what about the second miracle then?
Yeah, so the second miracle ended up being, I thought it was like I'm going to grow wings and fly around or something. Like, wow, what is going to happen here? But what it ended up being was I developed a seizure disorder, and I didn't know at the time exactly how it had damaged my brain, but it wiped out all of my memories, including working memory. So um, I was still able to speak, but I would say my language skills were around fourth or fifth grade. I mean, you couldn't tell in a way that I couldn't speak necessarily, but so I was communicating well enough. But yeah, my memories were wiped out, and all of it started at the beginning of COVID at the same time. Okay, so I lived alone, and here I am wandering around my home like a zombie, but I still continue to do psychotherapy over over telehealth. I continue to do psychotherapy. I couldn't remember my clients from week to week, their faces or anything about them, and some I'd seen for years. So I write everything down when they're talking, and then before the session, I would read the whole thing and go from there, sit in the seat and do my job. And no one ever knew that I was ill. And I have some
Whoa.
clients I saw before, during, and after, and it was as if nothing happened. And even talk about, apparently I was doing good work. So it was very, very odd. And the other thing that was happening during that time is I had been in a Rupert Spira group, and he's about spiritual awakening and becoming aware of awareness. He says it a lot, being aware of awareness. Um, so um, so that was most of my contact with the outside world. Uh, so during that time, again, my ego was obliterated. And I was in this Rupert Spira group looking at being aware of awareness. And so I really, I would say I had an awakening. It's not like Eckhart Tolle, where I, forever turned in, went to a altered state or anything. But I became very aware that the center of me was just pure awareness. And and that it became very easy for me to step back into it, and just just be watching everything happening, my body, my mind out there. I'm just watching it. At any rate, but it also was talking about, Rupert talks about, once you're awake, then the job is to conform your ego structure to the qualities of consciousness, which would be, lack of preferences, lack of resistance, not paying too much attention to ego as if it's something, to just sort of let it be a tool, to be conscious in every moment and non-resistant, that sort of idea. So given that I was experiencing that, it made my recovery very difficult. At some point, the seizures were under control, and I began to recover, not my memories, but working memory, and then building new memories, re-becoming a person. And as I was trying to re-become a person, I was hearing the teachings of that it's kind of foolish. The ego's just sort of a fool that don't take too seriously. So it was very difficult, very challenging. So I'll fast forward to the end. At some point, I realized that this was causing me great distress and disorientation, and that in fact I needed an ego structure to function in the world. And I wasn't going to buy into that. It's not important anymore. So I left the group and began focusing on my individuality, my authentic self, and trying to reconstruct an ego structure that supported my authentic self, you know, and to do it with love, like an inner child thing. The inner child is so then it's very similar to parts, isn't it? Begin to pay attention to your mind in a kind way, and together we're going to put this thing all back together. And we did. And so I've done some research since all that, and I think what happened is my hippocampus was damaged by the seizures. Now the hippocampus. So when my memories started coming back, not memories of the past, but information about the past. I could remember what is Dorothy's from The Wizard of Oz last name, Gail. I started remembering my language skills expanded again. I could remember some things about information, but what I noticed, and this is a couple, 2, 3 years process, and getting enough memory to be seated in the world, okay, that none of my memories about being a person ever came back. I don't remember me in those memories. I read about myself. I learned about myself secondhand by reading journals, texts, talking to people, and so forth. So I had to read about who I'd been. And sometimes,
Can I jump in?
Yeah, sure.
I've been sitting with this question, and you're beginning to answer it.
Okay.
And I'm guessing that my listeners have been, some of them at least, have been sitting with the same question. You told us that in great detail about what happened with the cancer, with the breast cancer. So now I think you're beginning to answer my question, which is, so you lost all your memory. How do you know you had cancer?
Yes, I wrote a book, a little book about it. And I read the book, and it was just fascinating.
Wow. So you know that you had cancer and recovered from it because you'd written a book about it.
Right. And it
Other
had
than
in
that,
a
you had
lot
no
of
memory
people.
of it.
Yes. I'm sorry. What'd you say?
Other than that, you had no memory of it.
Right. I didn't know who I'd been or
Wow.
what had happened per se. So I had to, learn from people who I'd been and what I was like in different
Wow.
things.
Are you in a profession that helps people discover, cultivate, and express their true selves? Are you a coach, a therapist, a spiritual leader, a health professional, scientist, writer, speaker, or other specialist that recognizes the power and value of authenticity? Would you like to be a guest on our podcast? We're looking for guests to bring on the show to expand this exploration of the true you. You'll find a link in the show notes to use to introduce yourself and start that conversation.
Yeah, so I know now that, so then when I sometimes will get I can remember my childhood home, like a photograph of it, sort of, kind of get it's like a snapshot, but it's 2-dimensional. I don't remember living in that home. I don't remember being me in that home. So nothing related to me being me in my history ever came back. And I'm like, I realized those are the memories not coming back. So I did some research, and the hippocampus is what's responsible for our sense of self and our memories related to personal memories, and that connection of personal experiences and memory. And so I figured out that's why I don't have memories of that. It's literally my memories about being that person never came back. I also figured out, why could I do psychotherapy? What in the world? That it's sort of like my ego structure was obliterated, right? And when you do psychotherapy, even now, I like to sit more in awareness and not have, not come from my parts or from myself, to really be present and have all that on them. Apparently, maybe I was even better than I am now. But then it at least explained how in the world could have that really been happening. So yeah, I became a person. So instead of the Rupert Spira, just your ego is this kind of fool. I rebuilt it and helped support it in a way that honored it and honored my sense of my real self. So how does one access their authentic self? Your emotions, your sensations, your intuition, and your preferences. And preferences are huge. Vanilla or chocolate. Okay. And your preferences. What do you want to do next? What do you want to do next? Do you want to go to the movie tonight, or don't you? At least know whether you want to. The friend says, please come. I want to go. I haven't seen you in a while. Do we go or don't we? At first, at least know whether you prefer to. All things being equal. No, I don't really prefer to go. I'm tired tonight. So that's being honest with yourself, being able to tap into your authentic self and being honest with yourself about it. I don't want to go. Now, the next step to authenticity is being honest with others in the world. So it's living from your authenticity, um, uh, and saying, you know what, I'm sorry, this isn't a good night. I'm just beat, and I hope maybe over the weekend, or let's definitely plan to go, but this isn't a good night. It's my belief that when we act from our authentic self, we're doing what's best. And I mean, in the higher sense, it's the best next step to go for ourselves in ways we couldn't even know. It's not necessarily what I want more than anything, but I can feel that that's the authentic leading that way. If we
Mhm.
follow it, it's best for ourselves.
Mhm.
People will look back and say, yeah, they'll say, boy, it's a good thing we didn't go to that meeting. Actually, they had a flood there. So, you look back and say, wow. But my belief is also that when we do what's best for ourselves, we are automatically doing what's best for the whole, because we are being our part of the system in its most functional way, playing its part in the best way, which adds to the functionality and the well-being of the entire system.
Violet, I want to jump in if I could. I have so many notes about things I'm wanting to ask you about, but just to expand on what you just now said. For years, I've been thinking about how what you say is true. That from my authentic self, there seems to be what I've been calling an internal guidance system
Yes.
that points me exactly where I should be going. And I talk to my clients about it in this way. When I was growing up, my siblings and I played a game called Warmer, Warmer, Colder, Colder. And the way it would work is one of us would hide an object, and then we would uh, get stationary somewhere and observe as everyone else looked for the object that we'd hidden, and we would give feedback to those that were looking. And so to my sister Chrissy, I might say warmer. And to my sister Cindy, I might say colder. To my brother Stan, I'd say really cold, giving them an indication of how close they were getting to the object. Warmer meant that they were getting closer. And it was just a lot of fun. Well, it seems like we're playing warmer, warmer, colder, colder in life too. Like if I can tap into this internal guidance system, that's what I've been calling it, and you're just putting such great dimension to it as you talk about it, that not only do I find my own purpose and my reason for being here, but as you say, it seems also to have far more expansive uh, benefits as well. Like everybody else around me benefits as well. And maybe, as Marty pointed out, I think you just pointed that out, Marty, that it would save me from, no, I guess it was you that said that, by the way. It might save me from that accident that was going to happen if I hadn't taken that exit just now.
Right. Yes. Yes. So it's guidance in terms of the greater picture. Like when you say, like knowing I wanted to be a psychotherapist, or at least just stumbling upon it, and realizing that that's what I wanted to be, and that becoming a passion, not just a profession. I think I am able to give the best of me to the world through that. So in the greater picture, where I want to live, what are, the greater things, but then also on the micro level, what is the next thing to do right now? Keep talking or be quiet. So every moment there's that guidance system. And awareness helps even more to really be aware of that, be conscious of, of, of being conscious of your authentic self, and pull back and be able to watch and say, oh yeah, there's the leading, moment to moment, as well as the big picture.
If I could, I'd like to begin to bring more into the conversation uh, the language that those that are listening, because they are oriented to the internal family systems model, if we could help them out a little bit. And so to do so, I have a couple of questions for you leading into that, and then I've got some deeper questions. if that's okay. Marty, I want to make sure that I leave space and room for you as well, if there's something that you want to make sure that you ask or comment about.
Hey, what's best for you is best for all of us.
Okay. First of all, I'd be interested in hearing you define the word spirituality.
So, as I spoke, I think of it. Okay, so I'm a body right now, and inside or running through my body is my soul, and that's where my preferences are coming from. It's the information about my individuality. And inside that soul is pure consciousness, the ability to be aware of everything. So that's how I see it. So, when they say we're spiritual beings having a human experience, that resonates with me. That seems to be what's going on here. And so, being a spiritual person, then I think I would sum it up this way, that the answers are within me. They're not out there. That's a more of a religious orientation. Here's the rules, here's the doctrines, here's the practices. Where spirituality is all the guidance is inside. And we look for the answers there, and that they're there to be found. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and nowhere else. That kind of idea. So it's I think psychotherapy is a kind of spirituality, because you're looking in, you're being introspective, you're seeing what's in there, what's going on there, and you're learning to do it hopefully in a compassionate way, and doing that, and then you pay more attention to your sensations, to your breath, your body, your intuition, and then come to value your authentic self. The truth. What do I really think about that? What do I really want to do? What do I really want to say? What do I feel like I should say in this conversation? And going, it's an inside out job, and following that.
Okay, good. So you said your ego was obliterated. That's something that you wrote when I sent you the questionnaire and asked you to help us get ready to have this conversation. So when your ego was obliterated, what was obliterated?
So everything was obliterated, all of my memories, even working memory. Where did I put my tea? What did I eat today? Literally. So everything for a while was obliterated before the seizures were under control. And then as I got on the medicine and my brain started to recover, I began to recover, not a whole lot of them, honestly, but some memories of the past as snapshots, kind of a thing. But memories, they involve us. You remember being there and how you felt. Did you like that steak? It was a good meal. It was fun. It was a groovy environment, and that you remember being inside of that memory and having that 3D experience. So since that was gone, as things started to come back, I had to reground myself in what are my preferences. What kind of ego structure do I want? Do I want to be funny when I interact with people? If so, what sense of humor do I want to have? What who to interact with, where to put my energy, how do I know if it's a good connection, if not, how much time do I spend playing the guitar, how much time do I spend with this or that, how do I want to do my hair or dress, like I had to rediscover my preferences that way, and then know that as I'm knowing that now, my ego is getting a download from my experiences as I explore myself, and
Now, based on,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt,
No,
but I want to make this connection. By the way, I want you to know that I'm coming from real interest here. I'm really curious and interested in learning from you, and it feels like that I am, like you're filling in some gaps for me that I've been trying to fill in this very conversation. So I heard from you that the soul, you see, you have this body, and the soul is within this body, and within the soul is pure consciousness, and that's who you are.
Yes.
That's
Right.
so I have this body, and inside inside it's not it. I'm sure you don't mean physically inside the body is a soul, or do you mean that?
Well, when the near-death experience, you say, I popped out of my body, there's a sense that it's inside, but I think the soul is much larger than even this one
Yeah.
incarnation. So I think it's coming through like a light coming through a prison, coming through
Yes.
it. That
Yeah.
part of it's
Yes.
inside of it and it's solid. So yeah, I kind of see it that
And you
way.
said that the soul is what maybe establishes my uniqueness, my preferences. So when you say your ego was obliterated, as you're describing it, you're describing a disconnection from your soul. Am I right?
No. So the way I think about the ego is it's our belief structures that give us a sense of being a person. So my body gives me a sense of being separate from you physically. And my configuration of belief structures or parts, that thought and belief structure gives me a sense of my thoughts being different from your thoughts. Me being, I like this, you like that, I'm feeling this, you're feeling that. So it's function and its mechanism. Who am I as a person? And usually that's downloaded in our childhood because it's just
So that's the ego.
yeah, we come to learn that, okay, I'm a kid and this is the right way to do it. Do your homework, brush your teeth, don't speak at the table. Whatever we learn, or we learn about our culture, we learn about what's expected, we learn maybe in religion what's good and what's evil and what's happening in this lifetime and what it all means, and how to be a good person relating to it, or how to rebel, and where to find people who are rebel. So we get a sense, but it's downloads from the beliefs we get from our family of origin, from our culture, and then our experiences. If you
Okay.
get bit by a dog, maybe you learn don't get so close to that type of dog again. And so we're
Please
learning
help me to understand.
all these programs about who you are and how to be in the world and how to interact is what I see as the ego structure.
Okay, now distinguish for me now the preferences of the soul. How can you distinguish that?
So, so, and I will say preferences, period. So let's go back to the example about your friend wants you to come with him to the movies tonight. They're really looking forward to it. And you realize as we get closer that you're tired and it isn't feeling like you want to, and so that all things being equal, you wouldn't prefer to go. I don't prefer to go. It's not like every time you're tired, you don't prefer to go. Sometimes we can be tired and prefer to go. So it isn't exact, but so preferences are the North Star. They're what telling us, in a sense, what our unique, authentic configuration, you could say our soul guidance, that's what we're getting. Now, thoughts might be, oh, we haven't seen each other for a while. I know she's really looking forward to it. And, how many times can you cancel on a friend? I canceled on her before. Okay. Or maybe saying, well, I don't want to go, but I know when I say I'm not going to, she's going to give me a hard time. So all of that, I know my preferences. Now the mind comes in, and starts to give its 2 cents about it. And then we decide, so do you follow what the ego or the parts of ego, a part has been,
There.
you know what? If you don't want to
Yeah.
go, don't go. And I'm with you. I'm in it. She gives us a hard time. I got your back. Right. And other parts that are freaking out and saying, gosh, maybe I am really a selfish person. Maybe I really am. I'm afraid I am. And gosh, I don't like being selfish. It doesn't, and I don't like people getting mad at me. So we have all these facets of the ego structure, belief structures that are coming into play. And so the more aware we are, the more we can step back into pure consciousness, we can notice that part and that part and that part without getting caught up. Part of me wants to do that, part of me wants, but those are the ego structure. But authentically, what I really want to do, all things being equal, magic wand, I can do whatever I want. This is what I want to do. So that's how you distinguish between it.
Got it. That's so helpful. I heard you say parts or facets of the ego structure. Would you agree? Did I hear it right?
Yes, what Richard Schwartz figured out is that the ego structure is not one thing, and ego structure, that it's a system of parts that kind of have their own belief structures, their own struggles, and like the mini personalities that are just part of the greater system of personality. And that it's not just a one way to look at it. I think, that we all have, who have used it, that is how the ego structure works. And we can access these different parts and help them, help them to become relaxed and less confused and cooperate with each other.
So one more step, one more question, and then I'm going to hand it back to Marty. We've got about 10 minutes left here before we need to wrap.
Okay.
So the next step is we've talked about parts, we've talked about ego, we've talked about spirituality and soul. Gosh, I'm loving this. Where does self come into all this? What is self?
So this is where my take on it is different than pure IFS. So kind of controversial. So now we don't listen to me as any kind of IFS expert. Now here I am with my own sense of it. I notice within my personality structure, there is a part that I've called the supportive self. And what it does, it doesn't have an agenda for itself. It's like it's just pure. So I'll do it this way. So let's say I'm struggling with something, and if I ask the supportive self to step forward, immediately it's like, here I am, sweetheart. I know you're struggling. I'm with you in this. So what do you want to do with this? Maybe we should just sit down and take a breath for a moment, or how does this sound? Do you want a cup of tea? So it's 100% in support of my being. It's kind, it's compassionate. It's now we're getting to the C's. It has those qualities, but it is a part of my personality it's like other parts. It steps forward and backward, but when I ask it to step forward, it's immediately there. It has no preferences of its own except to love and support and help me. So I think that's what IFS calls the capital S self. And that my sense is how I developed this part, or else redeveloped a part into it through inner child work. It's like I created a circuit down to my authentic self in a loving way. I love my inner child. How can I help? And I understand, and mirroring, and and being kind and developing a relationship with it like a parent is just there to support and affirm and help. And that part that I learned to talk to my inner child with, it developed this part of my brain that is the supportive self. And, it doesn't talk to me like an inner child so much anymore, but just a loving, supportive aspect to my being. So that is, to me, the capital S self that IFS speaks about. The capital S self that I might say is the I, and the pure consciousness is I can step all the way back in it. This is the awakening I had from Spira. I can step all the way back until I'm just a presence with no preference and it's just there, watching it all. And then so there's that pure consciousness thing, and I wouldn't say it's kind, compassionate, encourage. It doesn't have a personality, but its quality is open. We might say it doesn't come and go. It doesn't have judgment. It doesn't shift. it has a benign constancy, and it's just observing. So again, it's not unsupportive in any way, and it's interested because it's always there watching, but it doesn't have a personality like kind, compassionate, the C's of it. That I would say my supportive self has. So I now see that my supportive self, it really connects to pure consciousness and channels it through the personality so that it does have a personality to it. And that's how I see it.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Marty, I'm going to hand it back to you. Wow, Violet. Thank you.
Well, I want to, if you don't mind, ask a more mundane kind of question, but one that might be useful to the listeners. Not that what you just said wasn't, it was enormously useful, but I want to ask about your process, your methodology working with people, because they haven't been through these extraordinary, miraculous experiences, and yet you want to guide them to understand their self and their awareness and their parts and all of that. So what does the session look like? How do you do that? How do you get people to understand what you understand, having been through these experiences and they haven't?
Yeah, so I think it's very similar to probably what most IFS practitioners do. And I haven't taken any of the courses. So I'm familiar with the process. So it's just, so I start, just like, do you ever notice part of you wants to, part of you doesn't? That's how our mind is. They're literally a system of parts. And that if we interact with them in a kind, compassionate way and hear from them, it can help us to become more kind and loving, and a lot of traumas and distress that these parts can hold on to can be healed. And so we can access and we can help these parts, and we can understand our ego structure much better when we look at it that way. And then where I might, where I add in the consciousness aspect, I don't tend to, unless they really come at me wanting to know more about awareness and consciousness and being awake. But if they don't, we're just doing psychotherapy. I talk about, do you notice that, but you're conscious of it. We can become conscious. A part of me does this, a part of me does this. I prefer this as a human being. I'm experiencing this. A part of me says this, a part of me says this, but I prefer that direction. So I kind of just work in that way, that the more conscious we become and can step back from our personality and parts and see it, the more agency we can have. We can notice this part is distressed and we can give it our kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great talking to you. I think that Bill and I have a lot to talk about. That difference between pure awareness self and the self that I have. Bill and I have been trying to talk about that for a long time, and I think that you summarized it in a way that he and I are now going to be able to discuss that in a way we haven't up to this point.
Great.
I think so too. I think that was very, very, very helpful. I've had a sense that, Marty, what you've had to say about that is of great value. And yet you've sensed that there's been a disconnect for me. And I think Violet just really helped along those lines. And maybe it's been helpful I'm sure that for many of our listeners, it's probably also been helpful, especially those of us in the IFS model that I personally have felt like there's something a little bit off about the explanation of self as a separate entity or energy within the system that's separate from parts, and that is way too much, in my opinion, like the deities represented in religion, that are separate from us, that we have to somehow fight and climb and try and work for. That doesn't feel right to me. And the way that you just explained it, Violet, when I said, wow, thank you, was so validating and filled in a lot of gaps for me.
Okay. and my heart is so full. I mean, what gives me the most pleasure in life is to be helpful to people, and for someone to say that's helpful and that helped me put some things together, and thank you. And so,
Mhm.
I just, glowing with joy that it's been helpful.
Very much so. Thank you for being here.
Let's go back before we say goodbye completely. I want to talk a little bit more about this book. How far along? The name of the book: A Special Kindness, the Practice of Self-Love and Authenticity. How far along are you in the book?
So it's one of those things where it's almost like I've written a bunch of little essays, and
Mhm.
I understand the umbrella that I'm trying to do and how I would add my the breast cancer story, the inner child work stuff, and the obliteration of my ego, my personal spiritual awakening without maybe too much emphasis on it. But that I hit my message. What I have to say is what we've talked about today. So that's my message. How it's all going to come in the book. I had a seer, actually a medium, saying, don't rush the book. Take your time.
Mhm.
And I see now as I recover and I more and more conceptualize what's happened to me and all, now I understand the hippocampus. So she wants me to take my time. So I'm taking my time. So it's like there's all these little parts of the book are floating around, and I'm getting to the point where I'm about to start really putting them in a certain form.
I want to pitch my writing coach, Jerry Waxler, who's going to be a guest on the podcast.
Okay.
And he's helping me to write my memoir. Without him,
Oh,
I don't know that I would have been able to sew my story together as well as it has been.
okay. Is that Waxler?
Yep. And if you'd like, I'll just connect the two of you off stage here.
Great. I'd love that.
Okay. Well, wow. What an honor and what a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a delight.
We appreciate who you are, that you would be listening to this podcast, and want to acknowledge all those parts of you that yearn for the experience of the true you.
If you like this episode, click like, share it with others, and be sure to subscribe. Listen again next week for the newest episode.
Check show notes for a transcript and a link to resources, including a link to let us know if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast.
Thank you for listening and going on this journey with us back to the true you.